Welcome to Talk Across America. I'm Doug Miles, and we're here in beautiful Sarasota, Florida. And joining us now on our book talk segment, great to welcome a man who's written a really fascinating book about a topic we're all interested in, I'm sure, especially this week as it comes up to Easter week. It's called The Triumph of Christianity, How a Forbidden Religion Swept the World. We're joined today by Bart D. Ehrman, also had the best-selling book, Misquoting Jesus. He joined us by telephone today. And Bart, good to talk with you. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Yeah, good to have a chance to chat with you for a couple of minutes, and I had an opportunity to read through the book, and like we said, we're in Easter week as we talk today, and I'm sure anybody who studies religion, we all have millions of questions. You kind of dove into that. I guess just from reading through the book, it was kind of a trip to Greece that kind of inspired that interest, right?
Well, in some ways. I mean, I was visiting Greece, and I was in Athens, and I was looking at all these great ruins in the Parthenon and the Stoa, and I mean all these great ruins, the Temple to Hephaestus, and it suddenly occurred to me that Paul was in Athens, the Apostle Paul was in Athens, and he was like a nobody that nobody had ever even heard of, but in the end, Paul's religion triumphed. It defeated the Greek culture, the Roman culture, and I was struck by just how amazing that was.
Yeah, we've all, I think most people, no matter what religion you may be, have read through the Bible, have heard Bible stories, but you almost tend to forget these were actual people. It's not just a story. People wrote this back 2,000 whatever years ago, and this is history that actually happened. Most of it, I would think, hopefully is accurate that we've read about. But it kind of diving into it, the term Christianity, we kind of almost assume it's always been around, but it hasn't.
Well, it hasn't, and my book is about how it did become so dominant.
Right.
According to the New Testament, it started off with just a group of about 11 of Jesus' male disciples and a handful of women who, so some 20 people who came to believe he got raised from the dead. These were lower class, illiterate peasants from a rural part of the empire, who within 300 years, there were millions of Christians. So how do you get from 20 people to millions and to become the religion of the entire West? So that's what the book is about.
And when you think of today, obviously, with broadcasting and all that, somebody can get out there and, form, look at, L. Ron Hubbard with all what he did with, whether you believe it or not, that's not the point, but Scientology, he had broadcasting and media behind him, but back then there was nothing except word of mouth, right?
It's word of mouth, and I try to show in the book how that works, with one person converting another who converts another. I argue that, in fact, we don't have much evidence at all for there being any kind of like evangelistic rallies or big missionary efforts. It really is one person converting their spouse, who converts their neighbor, who converts their business associate, and it goes on like that for centuries until you have millions of people converting.
You talk a little bit about, in the book, that Christianity kind of came out of Judaism, which is kind of interesting. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, well, Jesus himself is Jewish. His followers were Jewish. They kept the Jewish law. They followed Jewish customs. And they had no intention of starting a new religion. They understood that Judaism was the true religion, and they had a true interpretation of Judaism. After Jesus' death, some of these followers came to believe he got raised from the dead, and but they still thought that, Jesus was the Jewish Messiah. He was sent from the Jewish God to the Jewish people in fulfillment of the Jewish law. If you want to follow Jesus, you have to be Jewish. And that was the view, really, until the Apostle Paul came along a couple of years later. Paul said, no, faith in Jesus is what brings salvation, whether you're a Jew or a Gentile. It doesn't matter, which means it doesn't matter whether you keep the Jewish law, which means if somebody becomes a follower of Jesus, they don't have to convert to Judaism. That made it possible for Christianity to become not just a sect of Judaism, but to become a world religion.
And the Emperor Constantine, talk a lot about in the book about him. Of course, we kind of associate with the Christian religion starting in Rome, or whatever it was back then called, but the Roman Empire, and he was kind of the man that was in charge for a long time when this happened, right?
Yeah, I start the book with a chapter on the conversion of Constantine. He's the first Roman emperor who became a Christian at the beginning of the 4th century. And I begin with him because a lot of people think that the reason Christianity took over the empire was because of the Emperor Constantine. And I try to show in the book that that's probably not true. It's certainly true that he became a Christian, but what I argue is that Christianity was growing at a rate that he probably would have become, that the empire probably would have become Christian whether Constantine converted or not. That it wasn't the emperor's Constantine's conversion that made all the difference. It's also not true to say that the Emperor Constantine made Christianity the official religion of Rome. He didn't do that. That happened only later, some decades after his death.
I know, again, you talk about in the book, we talk about the Bible and how that was written. So many different people, contributed to it over whatever amount of years it was. We're not exactly sure how those scrolls or whatever the written documents of the time kind of survived. But Paul, you mentioned, of course, he wrote several of the books, historical and what happened. But it's kind of amazing when you think of it. A book written so many years ago by so many different people kind of congealed into one volume that we all kind of read today, or hopefully most people read today. It's fascinating just to look at how that happened.
Well, it is, and I think what a lot of people don't realize is just how much diversity there is in the New Testament. That you have authors like Paul who have a particular perspective, and others have other perspectives. I mean, you have 4 Gospels, and they're not all telling exactly the same story, and so it's interesting to see how diverse early Christianity was. Even though it became the official religion of Rome, there was still a lot of diversity within the religion.
From doing your research, Bart, did it kind of alter your beliefs in any way? From you really dove into this hard with the historical research. Going into it, did you kind of change coming out of it?
Well, it massively affected my own religious beliefs. I started out as a very, very conservative evangelical Christian, basically a fundamentalist who thought that the Bible was the inerrant revelation of God. And based on my scholarship, I came to realize that, in fact, the Bible is a very human book. There are discrepancies and contradictions and historical mistakes. And so I became a very liberal Christian, and I was that for 15 years or so. Eventually, I left Christianity altogether, not related to anything in this book or related to my scholarship, but really related to the problem of why there can be so much pain and misery in the world if there's a God who's ultimately in charge of it. And so now I consider myself an agnostic. Sometimes I call myself a Christian agnostic because I still try to follow the teachings of Jesus, but I don't believe in God.
Yeah, it's the ultimate question I think everybody's going to ask when they get to wherever we hopefully go, heaven, wherever, that, we all have questions why certain things happen, but it is fascinating to think about. And again, it's a book filled with historical and interesting, background. You'd really dove into it, why Christianity started, how it continues to today, and it continues to evolve. And the name of the book is The Triumph of Christianity, How a Forbidden Religion Swept the World. I know we have a limited time today, Bart, but do you have a website? People get more information about the book?
Yeah, I'll tell you, the best place to get information about the book or about anything that I teach and think about Christianity, from Jesus to the New Testament to up through the Emperor Constantine, is I have a blog called the Bart Ehrman blog. People can just look it up and they'll find it. And I post 5 or 6 times a week, 1,000 words a day, on all sorts of topics of interest to anyone who is interested in the New Testament or early Christianity.
Great. Bart, pleasure talking to you. Again, congratulations on the previous book, and this one I'm sure will do as well or better, but hopefully we can talk to you again. Thanks for being with us today.
Great. Thank you very much.
And joining us now on our Book Talk segment, great to welcome a man who's written a really fascinating book about a topic we're Thank you for joining us today on Talk Across America. Please visit our website at dougmilesmedia.com for more great interviews and content. And if you're interested in any of the books we talk about on the program, please click the Amazon link on our website. It helps support the podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again real soon here from beautiful Sarasota, Florida.